I got asked to show how I close up the sleeves after I've set them, so I thought I'd make a tutorial. I'm going to use a Flatfeld seam here, and I'm actually going to sew up the underarm seam and the side seam in one go. The way I like to sew my Flatfeld seam starts by pinning the pieces with the wrong sides together. I'm just making sure to match up the underarm seams and the hem and the cuff as well, and I'll put a couple pins in between those to make sure nothing moves while I'm sewing it. And then I can sew those together. I'm just using a 3/4 inch seam allowance. It's a little bit wider than I think most people use for their Flatfeld seams, but I found that extra width to be helpful on really bulky areas where you've got Flatfeld seams on top of Flatfeld seams. Also, most of the rest of my top stitching is going to be about 3/8 of an inch apart, so this will match the rest of it. And then I can go ahead and trim one of the seam allowances in half or just under half. And you want to trim the seam allowance in the direction that you want your Flatfeld seams to point. So in this case, I want the Flatfeld seams to go towards the back. So I'm trimming just the back seam allowance. And then I can turn and press the untrimmed seam allowance over the trimmed seam allowance. And I want to stop that edge just inside my first line of stitching. And then I like to press everything flat because it's going to be a lot more difficult to maneuver when it's underneath the sewing machine. And the way I found it's easiest to press these is from the wrong side, just making sure that that Flatfeld seam is pointing in the right direction. And then I'm going to put in a second line of top stitching right along that folded edge from the right side, and that will finish off the Flatfeld seam. It's easiest to start from the hem and work towards the wrist versus the other way around. And it's pretty easy along the body here. But once you get to the arm and start working your way down it, it gets a lot more difficult because essentially what you're trying to do is sew the outside of a closed tube. And it only gets more difficult the further down the arm you go. What I found is helpful is almost thinking about it like you're turning the sleeve inside out, sort of rolling everything, making sure that everything is clear underneath the sewing machine and you've got enough space to take a couple stitches forward. Helps to go slow and just double check that everything is free and clear. You can stitch it the other way from the cuff to the hem. I do it this way on the opposite side just because I like to have the work to the left of the sewing machine as I go. But it is a lot more difficult to do it this way. Again, you can see how I'm sort of rolling the piece, almost turning the sleeve inside out and just making sure that I've got everything clear underneath the needle so I can take a couple stitches forward. If you do it this way, I found it's helpful to stop once you get close to the underarm seam and then actually take the whole piece out of the machine and then put it back in and then continue down the side seam. And that's how I closed up the sleeves after I set them. Let me know if you have any questions.